Today's guest speaker is AGT author Gayle Curtin. Today, Gayle is going to tell us about the use and techniques for blog posts. If you're interested in learning more about Gayle or other AGT authors and their books, go to our website at authorsguildoftn.org.
All right, good to see everybody today, and thanks for letting me talk for just a few minutes.
AGT.
Hello, yes, all right. A couple of years ago, after I wrote my first book, and wasn't quite finished with it, was in the process, I received some advice that I might want to write a blog so that I could market my book more effectively. So I got into that. As it turned out, it didn't help at all, because I was coming off of a 40-year career in insurance, and I wasn't going to write about insurance anymore, and that's what the book is about. So it really didn't help very much. However, I did get hooked on the process. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So if there's anybody here that's interested in blogging, you can at least see my process. You, of course, will do your own the way that you want to do it, but perhaps I can give you some information that might help a little bit on the journey. In the meantime, there are some 8.5 and 11 by 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper on your tables that have will frequently asked questions for online work. There are pros and cons about sending out your blog post on an email as opposed to online. So you might want to take a look at those in case you're interested at all. I won't get into the weeds about building a website because many of you may not be interested in that, and that would be a talk for another day anyway. So today I'm just going to be talking about writing posts. So with that, oh, and a promise. That's the last time I'm going to mention insurance. So why start this anyway? It is a bit time consuming, but that is entirely up to you. You decide how much time you're going to spend every week on the blog. I will say that I send mine out once a week, and that is not considered high traffic. What the recommendation is 2 to 3 times a week, but considering how much time I spend on that one, that just isn't going to happen. So that depends on your time budget, what you want to do with it, what your goal is for it in the first place. For me, I actually write for myself. So sorry for any of you that enjoy it. I'm not writing it for you. I'm writing it for me. If you enjoy it, that's a nice, advantage, but I'm really writing for myself. And I'll get into more about that later, about why. There is some expense involved. I will say that on the front end, I spent a truckload of money because I was building a website. And I wanted to do it right to the extent that I could. And I paid Bluehost some money for some people to help me build that. And I learned a lot. So trying to keep the brain fresh here, so that's a good thing about this. But you don't have to do that. You could send one out by email on a PDF or just within the body of your email. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. That's entirely up to you. As I mentioned, that does bring a learning curve, even about the writing, because writing a novel, writing a nonfiction is not necessarily the same as writing a blog post. You have to introduce your topic and get rid of it in one page. So it's a little bit different. It does give me a great sense of satisfaction to start something and finish something inside a week, and most of us can't do that with a book. So there's that. May lead to obsessive behavior, absolutely it has. When I was employed, I wrote an email to probably 80 to 100 people that was distributed that way every week to refresh their memory on some things that they needed to know about how to do their jobs, because I kept getting the same questions over and over again. So it was almost in a wave, like this question and then a different question and back and forth. So I started sending out an email once a week, every Tuesday, and I did that for 7 years. And that was the basis for my book. So I rewrote everything and fleshed everything out, but I called it Jill Quick Tips. And I sent it out every week. And some people actually saved them, and that was amazing. But I've become that way with this blog post. It has to be ready. I want it to go out at 6:19 on Thursday morning, every Thursday morning. And I haven't missed one yet. It's been a little over a year and a half, so there's that. So like I said, just a little bit obsessive, but that's up to you how far you want to take that. So start out by selecting a topic. And that topic is going to depend on what your point is in writing a blog post in the first place. Some of you may want to use it to actually sell your books, so you're going to go along with a theme on your book writing, whatever your topic is. And I would think, Danita, yours would be easy with poems, and we already know that Ernie has plenty of stories, so he would be able to do that as well. A lot of you have a lot of different things that you can talk about that would encourage people to take a look at your book, go to Amazon, buy it, come to the fairs, buy your book, whatever. So it just depends on what your purpose is for that. I would suggest that if you are going to pick a solitary theme, you make sure you have plenty of subtopics for that, because you don't want to run out of steam in 3 months and then switch. So just consider that. Mine is more scattershot because I'm interested in everything. I developed an intellectual curiosity very late in life, but now it's just kind of gone rogue, and I'm interested in everything. So I will never run out of topics because I'm listening to everybody talk. When I'm at the park, when I'm at church, when I'm in line at the grocery store, somebody might say something, I'm like, how does that work? I don't understand how that works, and I want to know more about that. So that's the reason I'm saying this blog is for me. I'm glad if somebody else enjoys it, but I'm writing to learn and to provoke thought in others. So it depends on what your agenda is as to what you're going to write about. Of course, you're going to do your research for it, unless you have a bunch of stories in your head like some of y'all do, and you can just write every week without ever looking anything up. But some of my topics are a little bit obscure, and probably there's nobody on the planet that knows everything that I have written about, because that would be really interesting if they did. If they knew how to make quilts and also how to make pottery and how to make whiskey and what the origin of coffee was, that would be an interesting person to talk to. So I have to do a lot of research. I, of course, go to Google, but I'm very careful with my online research because a lot of it is not credible. So what I generally do is I try to find something that says the same thing twice. So a couple of different sources, they agree on the story, and then I'm good to go. I'm not too worried about it. I always use the link in my posts, so if somebody wants to go to read the whole article, they can. I did have a couple of months, I was writing about a runner, I believe his name was Glenn Cunningham, who was burned badly as a child. And they told him he would never walk again, but he became a famous runner. And there were some conflicting stories online about how he got those burns. And I couldn't resolve that, and both of those seemed like they should be credible sources, so I just put them both in there and said, you can go to both these places. I have no idea which one's correct. So basically, have a good time with that. But I didn't pick one over the other. Surveys. I've done Facebook surveys because I don't keep a distribution list on my email. You can do one on Gmail, has a great survey tool, and that works when you have a list. If you don't have a list, you might want to go to Facebook or some other social media. When I use mine, I've used them a couple of times, and I found out a few things. I already knew it's difficult to write survey questions to actually get the information back that you were looking for, because unless you word it very well, you're going to get answers, but you're going to go, well, that's what they thought you were asking, so that's what they answered. I did one time because I was trying to prove a correlation between people who love algebra and can't read maps to people who love geometry and do read maps, because I'm one and my husband is the other. And I thought, this has to be wiring. There have to be more people than us. And it turns out that there were. Now, I didn't have a credible report, nothing I could write a thesis out of, because I didn't have enough people. But that's the kind of obscure things that I write about because they interest me. Family history. We all have some stories in our family that we could write about. Some of them we can write about and some of them we can't, but some of them make great content. One of my old bosses told me that you can write stories and you can name names, but you can't write stories and name names. So you might want to remember that too, of course. You can use the stories sometimes, dress them up a little bit, and nobody will know who they were about. And books. So books are always a good source as long as you're very familiar with the book. If you're not, it may take a little more time to get down to that nugget in the book that you're interested in. I was showing this book to Sam earlier. This is one that I have used in the past that I really love. It is full of heat maps that tell us how people name certain objects in certain places. So for the South, very often, whatever a carbonated beverage is, it's Coke. We go get a Coke, even if we're buying a Dr. Pepper. So it's things like that. Or, I don't do this as often as I used to because I've lived too many places, but down here, when you go to the grocery store and you pull that bad boy out of the line to go shopping, it's a buggy. But some people call it a cart. It probably is supposed to be a shopping cart. Tennis shoes, sneakers, there are all kinds of things in here. So this kind of book is really easy to find what you're looking for. But if you get something that's the size of Gone with the Wind and you haven't read it before, you're going to have a hard time. I'm just saying. So books are good. Filtering. So sometimes you query online and you find way more information than you needed, and you're going to have to pull that sucker back and focus. Because I don't know about you, how long of a blog post you would prefer to read. Mine run about 900 to 1,000 words. And if it gets too lengthy and you have too much detail in there, it's kind of like somebody's talking to you and they go off on a tangent and you're trying to remember how they started. You know, what the whole point of the conversation was in the beginning, and you don't want to do that with your blog posts. I've already mentioned conflicting input, so you just have to be careful. If you can't resolve it, you might want to include both sources or just pull it out and do something else. Information desert. So sometimes you can't get anything. You put in your search query and nothing comes back. I would suggest asking for it a different way, maybe talking to somebody else about how they would ask for it, or maybe there's just nobody else that's interested in that but you. And that has happened to me once or twice. I hope it doesn't happen again. And then there are rabbit holes, which are kind of like too much detail, except they lead you places that's not going to help build your post at all. It's just peripheral information. So just some pitfalls you might want to be aware of. And then there's format and style. So who here has read a book by Stephen King? All right, most of us. If you opened up a Stephen King book and it started out like you would expect a Danielle Steele book to start out, I think it would throw you. So for me, I like for all of my writing to be the same. It starts out the same way, the middle is the same way, it ends about the same way as far as style and format. So on visuals, I always start out with a featured image, which is really easy online. That's one of the benefits of doing something online, the free images that you can search for. So I start out with that. I have next a quote, and I'll go through this again in a minute. The tone is always casual because my tone always is. Sorry, listen to my voice. And voice. I'm always talking to my reader. It is never third person. I'm not saying this is the way you should do it, but rather, perhaps you would want to look for consistency. So as I mentioned, I start out with a selected quote every time, something that pertains to my topic. I usually frame that with some sort of context to connect it to what I'm talking about. And then subsections, because all of that narrative, when it's really long, is a little bit intimidating. So you would break it up just a little bit in subsections with titles. And where I got this, because I didn't start out this way, I get prompts online for what might improve the blog posts, and I take those to heart. I don't do everything it says, just like I don't do everything Grammarly thinks is right, but I do listen to it on some things. Images and videos, I mentioned that I use a featured image. Sometimes I use their photos. This particular one is mine, so I use mine where I can. You can also use videos, YouTube. If it will load for you, you're free to use it. So that's usually the way I find out whether it's going to work or not. I throw it in there, and if it won't play, well, I go pick another one. background and context, I usually pick my topic and then I work my way around to come back to, here's what I think about this, what do you think about it? So I always lead with a question. What are your thoughts on this? Because this is what I think is going on here. I either don't believe it, I believe it, or I think this is a tricky question or whatever. What do you think? So again, that's part of the consistency as well. So these are just some side notes. Already mentioned frequency. Weekly is not frequent. I enjoy writing because it makes me more aware of the world. But I'm not talking about writing books. I enjoy writing books. But as far as a post goes, I listen to everything. I'm way more curious than I was 15, 20 years ago. And when I hear about something that I don't know about and I have to research it, then I learn more. And I think that probably ultimately is going to enrich my writing. If nothing else, it's more practice. And as our speaker last month said, practice is always good. Can't lose by practicing. You might want to use social media. Sometimes I put a teaser in the day before, so on Wednesday, sometimes a teaser about my blog. Already mentioned consistency. I have a way online to get feedback, and that's good. So it's not feedback about how you're writing, because usually I get a text if I make an error. But feedback on, I like this and this is what I think about this. Also, specifically on posts, I would caution you on paying strict attention to your punctuation, spelling, grammar, because probably none of us can afford to have an editor for a weekly post. So it's up to us. I probably read mine 15, 20 times before it goes out. I'm thoroughly sick of it by the time it publishes. But anyway, I want it to be right because I would be seriously humiliated if I had something out there that was wrong. But like I said, I have a couple of friends that are maniacs too, so they usually let me know if there's a problem. I'm going to pull up the site here in just a second, but in the meantime, does anybody have any questions?
Just a comment. That was very well organized. Compliment.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
How do you get feedback on your posts?
Because there's a place at the bottom that says comments at the bottom of, I'll bring one up. Let's see, let's go to Quill.
Do you want to comment on SEOs?
It does say things. I haven't been as diligent about following direction there. It does give me prompts when I'm setting it up as far as tag words. I'm trying to think what else.
Descriptions.
Topic descriptions, yeah. I do good.
Headers.
Yeah. So this is one I did, let's see, back in December. So again, start out with featured image, little quote, come on down. This particular one, this is a long one. I interviewed two of my friends that do quilting. One of them does it commercially, and it got a little crazy. I should have just interviewed one because this one is really long. The pictures on here are theirs, examples of some of their quilts, and you can see I just did 2 columns on here so they could talk about each of them, how they got started. This one probably is more than 900. And this is another way, something in a border that sets it off helps break up that big block of narrative in the middle, so it rests the eye a little bit. So I do that with either a photo gallery or something like this, something with bullet points, put a border around it, and they may even skip over that, may never even come back to it. This one was very long. They're not all. And the one on pottery also. So anyway, you get my idea. It's just all over the place, and I really enjoy writing it, and I hope that if any of y'all have any questions about creating a website, or yes, Becky.
Well, first of all, thank you for speaking, but I guess I was wondering, how do you, each Thursday when you send out, how many followers do you have, and then how do you know if they read it or not?
I get a report on that.
Okay, so you know if
Yeah.
they read it or even open it, or if
Yes.
they don't open it?
Yeah.
You know that as well?
Now here's the thing though, because I post mine on Facebook too,
Okay.
as a heads up, and I have no way of knowing because it's reading it's reading what my subscriptions, what they're opening and what they're reading. I only have 50 subscriptions, but I know more people than that are reading it, because sometimes I run into people and I go something about my post, and you're not even on the list. So I know there are more people than are on the list. I don't really know how many people are reading it. I know how many people who are subscribed who are reading it.
Gayle, do you use WordPress? Am I seeing
I
what you?
WordPress. As I mentioned on here, because it mentions Bluehost, that's where I bought my domain
Okay.
and some security items. Where almost everything I work in WordPress. Thank you.
Thank you.